In our Moorish Holy Quran, primarily through chapters 2 through 19, we get primarily the degrees of Jesus, as well as the degrees of the harbinger, John the Baptist. In the Moorish Holy Quran, we go through the life of Jesus and his travels through Europe, India, Africa, etc. And we get an intimate look, if you will, of the lessons that he's learned and the lessons that he's taught. Islam? And within those teachings, it behooves us to take from it this degree of Jesus. Why Jesus? We are, as Brother Raphael said, we are Moorish American Muslims. And it is a misnomer, if you will, that Muslims or Muslims, people that follow, that adhere to the faith of Muhammad, alayhi salam, they touch little on Jesus. They discuss little of Jesus. But we as Moorish American Muslims, our doctrine is the basis of our doctrine.
That's right.
Helms from the degree of Jesus.
Islam.
Why is that? What is the reason? And there's many reasons.
Right.
Many reasons. We talk about redemption. Jesus is the symbol for redemption. He is the representation. And keep in mind, I'm using my words carefully. I didn't say that he is our salvation. He's the representation of that salvation.
Islam.
For men. He represents justice.
Right.
By default. Islam. In our Quran questions, it asks, what is the duty of a prophet?
Right.
To save the nations from the wrath of Allah. So Jesus, amongst many of our prophets, came down as a thought of Allah made manifest to save the nations from the wrath of Allah.
That's right.
And those of us that are student our history, we all know that during that time period, during the iron hand of oppression that were of Rome, that was being that the Palestinians were facing at that time.
Right.
We knew that a prophet had to come down and save that particular nation from the wrath, because a wrath was going to come if they continued along that path.
That's right.
And to keep it in perspective, and to keep it into a practical perspective, if anyone, regardless of our orientation, of our faith, if we continue in excess and not in moderation, that is ultimately bad for us. We're going to go down that downward spiral.
Right.
Islam? Are y'all with me? Y'all understand what I'm saying? And that ultimately, believe it or not, that's called obsession. That is obsession. That is a form of obsession, especially when you have no control over your livelihood and the things that you do. That you're continuing in excess. And it's not in benefit to you. If anything, you're acting as the glutton.
That's right.
Islam?
Islam.
So when you indulge in excess, you're leading down a path of destruction, because it's not healthy.
That's right.
And then something has to come along, an anomaly, if you will, to put things back in order.
That's right.
Some of us call it laws of attraction.
Right.
That somewhere along the line, we either attract things that we deem quote unquote positive, or we deem quote unquote negative, that changes and affects who we are in our daily lives and our reality that makes us change or continue to do a thing depending on what's in our benefit.
That's right.
We should look at that with that practical definition, if you will, the one of the major principles of a prophet. It's an anomaly, for lack of a better word. It's an entity, rather, that comes into place in hopes to change the direction of a thing that's eventually going to go down the path of destruction, of decadence, ultimately leading to destruction. And the thing about destruction is that when we think about it, we don't think about how destruction or chaos brings about life.
Right.
But when you're going towards the path of destruction without any substance, without any end result, it's for naught. Islam? But y'all with me? Y'all get what I'm saying? So, when we talk about the degree of Jesus, we're talking about a prophet who came to show us certain principles. Ultimately, the principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice.
That's right.
Islam?
Islam.
He came to show us another way. He came to show us that proverbial clean glass of water versus the dirty glass of water,
Right.
or the Kool-Aid, or the juice, or all those other things that will be harmful to us if we continue to drink that, and if that's all we know.
That's right.
Islam.
Quick question. Think to yourself, how many people do you know that do not drink water? And just think how detrimental to that person's health, or how much is a hindrance to a person's health if they're not taking in water.
That's right.
They're not nourishing themselves or replenishing themselves of the very thing that they're made out of.
That's right.
Islam?
Islam.
So again, when we think about the saving power, the everlasting gospel, that is a part of every part. So why wouldn't you want to partake in a substance and an element that is a part of you?
That's right.
Islam?
Islam.
We are Muslims, right?
Islam.
Matthew 5:9, and I'll paraphrase, it says, Jesus said that blessed are the peacemakers.
That's right.
They should inherit the kingdom of heaven. Or they are the rightful children of God. Islam? The great God. So he gives us an example. He lets us know that we as Muslims are, if anything, on the right path. Because those that are Muslims that are practicing peace, that we are destined to take back our state. We are destined to take back our rightful place in God's kingdom. In the great God, Allah's kingdom. Islam? So that gives us one sign. That's something that I want y'all to keep in mind when I read forward, or when I continue to read on. I'm going to read certain parts of an article called Why Jesus? And I'm going to read certain parts. I'm going to jump around because I want us to see, certain things that Jesus has left behind for us to follow.
Right.
For us to lead as an example.
Yes, sir.
Islam?
Yes, sir. Islam.
Jesus taught to forgive men and you will be forgiven.
Right.
He taught us that not to lay up the treasures for yourself upon the earth where moth and rust corrupt, where thieves break through and steal. So right then and there, he's teaching us the principles of forgiveness.
Right.
And that comes back, our prophet says that, and I'm paraphrasing, that don't look for evil in everyone, but when thou hast transgressed,
That's right.
forgive but never forget.
Islam.
And then he also says not to keep the treasures for yourself. In other words, don't conceal the light. Some of us walk around with information that is in our minds that someone could use. And it doesn't have to be the most deepest thing, but it can be something as simple as, you are not Negro black in color.
That's right.
And let me show you how. Let me not just tell you that you're not Negro black in color. Let me show you.
That's right.
Let me show you who you are by ways of my actions, by ways of my thoughts. Islam. Let us not conceal this concept of being a Moorish American like it's a secret or prestigious thing to have.
That's right.
And it is prestigious, but it's not nothing to be kept secret.
That's right.
Islam?
Islam.
And on the flip side of that, Jesus taught us not to give which is holy to dogs. Neither cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you apart violently. In other words, be mindful of the information, of who you give that information to, with that in mind. Our prophet says that we are the revealers of the light. We are the revealers of the light.
That's right.
But in order to reveal the light, one must be the light. First have the light. Islam. So these are certain jewels that I wanted to give from Jesus, from this particular doctrine. But I want to go on and turn into chapter 17. Of our Moorish Holy Quran. Jesus appears fully materialized before Apollo in the Silent Brotherhood in Greece. Appears to Claudia and Juliet in the Tiber near Rome. And he appears to the priests in the Egyptian temple at Heliopolis. Now the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how is it that Jesus is able to appear in that many places when it is said that he has been killed, he has been murdered? That is the question. And then not only does he appear to them in different places, but it seems that he appears to them simultaneously.
Right.
All at once.
That's right.
I'm going to read, and I'll jump around. I'll let y'all know what verses I'm going on, but I'll start with verse 1. It says, Apollo, with the Silent Brotherhood of Greece, was sitting in a Delphian grove. The oracle had spoken loud and long. The priests were in the sanctuary, and as they looked, the oracle became a blaze of light. It seemed to be on fire and all consumed. The priests were filled with fear and said, a great disaster is to come. Our gods are mad. They have destroyed our oracle. But when the flames had spent themselves, a man stood in the oracle's pedestal, on the oracle's pedestal, and said, Allah speaks to man not by an oracle of wood and gold, but by the voice of man. The gods have spoken to the Greeks and kindred tongues, and through images made by man. But Allah the One now speaks to man through Jesus, the Holy Son, who was and is and evermore will be. Islam? Now, in the beginning of this chapter, it says that the oracle has spoken loud and long. So now the question is, how is it that the oracle was able to speak long? Well, how was he able to speak loud when he was made up of wood and gold? In other words, he was an idol. So what we're saying is that the men, the priests, were just sitting there looking at a block of wood. Islam?
Islam.
And they were looking for the answer within that block of gold, within that block of wood and gold. How is that? I mean, it's one thing to meditate on that, but these guys were literally looking for the answer of something that has no eyes to see and no ears to hear. Islam? And then the oracle was set ablaze. And it was on fire. The light had returned. The light had returned to this once considered inanimate object. And Jesus appeared. And he said that the gods had spoken to Greeks and kindred tongues through images made by man, but Allah, the one, now speaks to man through Jesus, the Holy Son, who was and is and evermore will be. So now we have a living entity that is bringing the word to man.
That's right.
We have a living example. We have someone that can tread the way and not just point the way.
That's right.
That's right.
Because a block of wood can do the same.
That's right.
Islam?
Islam.
He goes on by saying that this oracle shall fail. The living oracle of Allah, the one, will not fail. Islam?
Islam.
We're going to jump down to verse 10. And it says, or it reads rather, behold, for I have risen from the dead with gifts for men. I bring to you the title of your vast estate. Our prophet Noble Ali is a prophet that was sent to the Asiatic, the inhabitants, or the descendants of Africans, or Moroccans rather, that inhabited the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa that are now on these shores of America. He was sent to redeem. And when we talk about the concept of redeeming, we're talking about when we redeem our title or so on and so forth to give back. You're giving back something and you're getting something in return. Our prophet is that redeemer.
That's right.
So he's returning to us our estate.
Islam.
He's returning to us what we're worth.
That's right, man.
Because when we talk about an estate, we're not just talking about something, we're not just talking about a physical estate.
That's right.
We're talking about a spiritual estate. We're talking about a moral estate. So we can come back and continue to leave that estate behind for our future generations to come.
Islam.
But the only way that we're able to do that is by the direction of the prophets that left the directions cleanly cut. Islam?
Islam.
That is the gift. That is the gift that we have. Sometimes we are mistaken when we want to receive these miracles. We want to receive, the magician stuff. The flick of the wrist. But our prophet Jesus says that the devil can do those mighty things as well.
That's right.
The best gift is the one that comes from within.
That's right.
The best gift, that is the one that keeps giving and giving and giving.
Islam.
The best gift is the one that you can leave behind for your loved ones. Those principles,
That's right.
those characteristics. Islam? He goes on in verse 11 saying that all power in heaven and earth is mine. To you, I give all power in heaven and earth. 12. Go forth and teach the nations of the earth the gospel of the resurrection of the dead and of eternal life. Through Jesus, the love of Allah made manifest to men. Islam?
Islam.
Resurrection from the dead. For those of y'all taking notes, write down resurrection. Islam?
Islam.
We're going to jump down to, now we're going to do 13.
Islam.
13 on chapter 7 says, and then he clasped Apollo's hand and said, my human flesh was changed to higher form by love divine, and I can manifest in flesh in the higher planes of life at will. But then he goes on by saying, what I can do,
Right.
all men can do.
That's right.
Go teach the gospel of the omnipotence of man.
That's right.
In the Passion text, also known as the Holy Bible, we can look at John chapter 14, verse 12 through 14, where he gives a similar parable, saying that I will be able to, that you will be able to do greater things.
That's right.
Islam.
Islam.
Then he disappeared. Islam.
Islam.
Then we jump to, then we jump to Claudius and Juliet, his wife. And they lived in Palestine and Rome. And they were servants of Tiberius. But they had been in Galilee. They had walked with Jesus by the sea. Now Claudius and his wife were on the Tiber on a little boat, and a storm swept the sea. But the boat was wrecked, and Claudius and his wife were sinking down to death. Now when we read these particular verses from this particular chapter, I want us to take a look at the front cover of our Quran questions.
That's right.
Because we have that demonstration of our prophet holding humanity in his arms,
That's right.
coming from the cares of the world.
That's right.
And what he's saying, when we have that, so we know that according to the doctrine of the Moorish Science Temple of America, when we look at the seas of the water, that represents the cares of the world, how it sways,
Right.
how it's inconstant,
That's right.
how it can sometimes be harsh, how at other times it can be pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
But nonetheless, it is all our burdens to bear.
That's right.
Islam?
Islam.
And the key is not to be ashamed of it, because we can't live out on the shores. No man is an island unto himself.
That's right.
Teach more.
Islam? So sooner or later, we're going to have to go out
That's right.
to them shores
That's right.
and demonstrate. We're going to have to teach our people how to swim.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, it's how many of us have read the 48 Laws of Power? I can't remember what law it is, but I will say that, and I'm paraphrasing that, it gives a similar parable that no man should live unto himself.
Islam.
That after a certain period of time, you can no longer be in exile. You can't be a hermit,
That's right.
because you will be that again. That's an example of excess. That's an example of excess in your own demise,
Right.
because you're going to end up driving your own self crazy
Mm-hmm.
with your teeming thoughts. So it's important that as we are on the shores of salvation, that we continue to study on those principles and learn how to swim, so we can go back into those cares of the world and bring other people back into those shores of salvation. Islam?
Islam.
We're going to 19, and it says, and Jesus came and took them by the hands and said, Claudius and Juliet, arise and walk with me upon the waves. Islam?
Islam.
We all remember that story of Jesus walking on water. Islam? Walking on the cares of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Resolution is his name.
That's
Islam?
right. Islam. That's
He
right.
said the troubles will be, he will trample on his feet.
That's right.
Islam?
Islam.
And they arose and they walked with him upon the waves.
Mm-hmm.
So again, how is Jesus able to do this simultaneously? How is he able to go from Greece to Palestine and assist and aid these people? Because he said that he's coming in the flesh.
Right.
1,000 people saw the three walk on the waves, wisdom, will, and love, and saw them reach the land, and they were all amazed. And Jesus said, you men of Rome, I am the resurrection and the life. They that are dead still live, and many shall live, will never die.
Islam.
Never die.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we're given that degree of resurrection. Why is that? And for the sake of time, I'm gonna actually stop there, because I believe that I've got to that point where I can drive it home when we talk about resurrection. See, the thing is that when you're Negro, Black, and colored family, you're considered dead. Islam?
Islam. That's right.
But when we get that, when we are receive those principles of Jesus, not only are we receiving the principles of justice, doing unto others as you would have those do unto you, Not only are we receiving those principles of redemption, but we are receiving the keys and the principles of resurrection.
Right.
Because how else are we able to get in the mindset of raising ourselves up from being no more than chattel property, from being no more than being considered Negro, if we don't know the degrees of the resurrection?
Islam.
That's right. Islam.
Prophet said the resurrection is a fact when you have love. Islam?
Islam.
So, when we think of Jesus, let us think about those principles of how we are to raise our people up from the dead. How we are to raise yourself up from that dead state of mind. From that dead state of spirituality. Because when you're in a dead state of spirituality, that means you have no love for yourself.
Islam. That's
You're
right.
frozen.
Yeah.
But when you have that life in you, when you have that principle of love in you, that means you are forever eternal. You are resurrected.
That's right.
So things that are considered dead always has the potential to be reborn.
That's right.
Islam?
Islam.
So with that, I leave as I came.